Eagles, Bills made a deal. It's actually one of two trades the Bills made yesterday. The Bills also sent Sammy Watkins to the Los Angeles Rams. The Bills walk out of yesterday. They now have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, 2 third-round picks in 2018. So to get some insight on what's going on up in Buffalo, also to let you Eagles fans out there know who is Ronald Darby. We have Mike Rodak covers the Buffalo Bills for ESPN. Mike, I just talked to you a couple of weeks ago, and guess what? It's almost like fate happened. These teams are talking, a trade happened, and now you're back on.
It's crazy, right? And it seems like it always happens that way in Buffalo, where we think something's true or something's, settled for the time being, and then boom, something else happens, whether it was Doug Marrone or Rex Ryan, or now we have a new regime in there, and they're making their own decisions, and there's more turnover in a team that's had a lot of it the last couple of years.
So the GM Bean, it looks like he basically said, I'm not going to go into free agency and deal with Sammy Watkins. It almost seems like they're saying, we want to see what we have this year, and we're getting all these draft picks, so if we want to hit a full reset button, we can do it with the draft next year.
Yeah, they're kind of towing a line right now between rebuilding and still trying to compete this year. I know, like I wrote yesterday, that I really think, this is in some ways punting away the 2017 season. And Brandon Beane kind of fired back during his press conference and said, I'm not throwing in the towel. Anybody who knows me, we're not going to just give up on this year, which is something, he sort of has to say that, as the leader of the team. They can't just have their players go into this year thinking that there's no hope. But I think you look at the moves. I mean, you give up your top wide receiver and your top cornerback for decent players, but certainly lesser players in Jordan Matthews and E.J. Gaines, corner from the Rams, then you're clearly looking at a rebuilding project if you're going to make those moves 3 weeks before the season. So, I think that's their goal here, is to accumulate some draft picks next year, and it may very well be that they move up, take a quarterback, or they move into 2019 or something else. At least gives them some flexibility in trying to build this team for the long term.
I think this might be a blessing in disguise for Tyrod Taylor, and here's my reasoning why. Jordan Matthews is one of only 5 players in NFL history with 65-plus receptions, 800-plus receiving yards in each of his first 3 seasons in the NFL. And you have a guy in Tyrod Taylor who his number one receiver wasn't always available, whereas the majority of Jordan Matthews' career, he hasn't missed due to a bunch of injuries like Watkins has. So it might be a productive thing to have a guy that you at least know is going to be out there week in and week out for a quarterback in Tyrod Taylor, who's basically having to prove to his new bosses if he's the quarterback for them or not.
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, I think the availability aspect of Matthews should help him, although I know from reading some stuff down in Philadelphia, it sounds like he's dealing with some knee issues, or at least this offseason he was. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But, if you get a consistent guy who can catch 60 or 70 passes this year in Matthews, then that could help Tyrod. But I think overall you're still losing some talent, especially in the deep game. I mean, that was the bread and butter of Watkins and Tyrod when they were really cranking on all cylinders the last couple of years, was that deep ball. And they don't have anybody on the roster that can do that anymore. So they're not putting a lot of fear in defenses. And you look at, Jordan Matthews and Zay Jones and Anquan Bolden. It's not the greatest group of wide receivers. It's not the worst either. But at the end of the day, I do think it's going to be tough sledding for Tyrod Taylor. I don't think he's a quarterback who's all that great about throwing over the middle. He's not tall enough really to see over the offensive line. That's one of his problems. So, a guy like Matthews or Bolden, who's more of a possession guy over the middle, may not be the best fit for him. But we'll see. I mean, it's not the end of the world for him, but I think the Bills are certainly making it tougher on him to try to prove himself this year as a franchise quarterback.
The Eagles got Ronald Darby, his 23-year-old second-round pick from Florida State. He was part of that Florida State National Championship team. He was second in the Rookie Defensive Player of the Year voting in 2015. So tell our listeners out there, who is Ronald Darby and what does he bring to Philadelphia?
Well, he had a great year, as you mentioned, as a rookie 2 years ago in Rex Ryan's scheme, which is very man coverage based. Obviously, it uses a lot of blitzing up front, but puts corners on an island. As Darrelle Revis obviously played for several years there in New York. And Darby played that role pretty well his first year. Like you said, second Rookie of the Year voting. He probably outplayed Stephon Gilmore that year. And then last year he comes in and definitely slumped. It wasn't a terrible performance, but it wasn't nearly what he had 2 years ago. Really tough to say why exactly that was the case. I mean, it's pretty much the same scheme that he was playing in, but just never really seemed to get it going last year. He had some issues, especially in the middle of the year. And now he comes in this year with Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier running the defense, and that's much more of a zone-based scheme. And I don't really think it was a great fit for Darby. So I think that's part of the reasoning why he was shipped out here. Of course, he's going to a zone-based scheme in Jim Schwartz and what he runs in Philly. So I'm going to be interested to see how well he fits in there. Obviously, Schwartz has tried to bring in some ex-Bills players, not some of the guys he coached. Obviously, McKelvin and Ron Brooks have come in the last couple of years, and McKelvin's gone already, but he did not coach Darby. But he is bringing in the next Bill and Darby and trying to make him work in that system.
That kind of leads to my next question, which is we've seen the Eagles do this now. You mentioned McKelvin, you mentioned Brooks. They also brought in Corey Graham. So you have all these former Bills kind of coming over to Philadelphia. Darby seems like he's probably, though, the most talented guy of all the Bills guys that they've gotten. In your mind, is Darby valuable enough to warrant a third-round pick and a wide receiver like Jordan Matthews?
I personally think it was a little much for the Eagles to give up for him. I think that Darby can be a solid number 2 corner. I think it's gonna take some work for him to be a number 1 corner in this league, and I'm not sure he ever will be. In the mold of a Gilmore or somebody else, Peterson, Talib. He's not one of those guys. So it depends on how you value Matthews. I mean, I think Bills fans are looking at, like you mentioned, the stat about him in the first 3 years and the 65 catches, and they're saying, oh, we're getting a great receiver. I don't think Eagles fans would probably agree. I mean, I don't think Jordan Matthews is in the same category as Sammy Watkins. But still, between that and a third-round pick can be pretty valuable. So, I don't know. I can see where the Eagles are coming from with the trade, but just watching Darby the last couple of years, I'm not totally convinced that he's worth the cost of what they gave up for him.
Eagles general manager Howie Roseman said at the press conference yesterday that if he could have gotten Darby for less than Matthews in the third-round pick, he could have. And there's been speculation that the Eagles were negotiating from a position of weakness because they were so desperate for the cornerback position. Do you feel like between the trade with the Rams and the trade with the Eagles that the Bills GM Bean basically just found the way to, for lack of a better term, fleece 2 franchises in one day?
I think it might be more true in the Eagles' case. I think it's still, jury's going to be still out in the Watkins trade, because if Sammy Watkins stays healthy, he can be, a perennial Pro Bowl wide receiver, and he's still 24 years old, so he's got a lot of time ahead of him. So that, we'll have to see how that works out for him. But I like the Eagles trade, like I said, for the Bills. So that one could be better, but a lot of this is going to depend on how the Bills use these draft picks next year. Like you mentioned, they have 6 of them in the first 3 rounds. If they trade up and somehow can get, let's say Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen or Josh Allen, maybe, they get their franchise quarterback, in which case, of course, it was more than helpful to trade away Sammy Watkins, and that's a win for the Bills. But we'll have to see exactly how it plays out, and it may take 4 or 5 years for this trade to really be graded by some of our experts here.
That's kind of where I was thinking about, because, when I saw all these trades go down, I saw the draft picks start lining it up. I thought there might be a situation where in the 2018 draft, whether it's before the draft or on draft night, maybe it's the Bills are the team that trades up, whereas this past year they're the team that traded down to help somebody else get a quarterback. They may be the team that trades up next year with this influx of draft picks to go get a quarterback like the 3 guys you mentioned.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's going to depend on, does a guy like Sam Darnold come out this year? Because I know that he's not exactly committed to coming out of school after this season. And B, I think it depends on who exactly is at the top of the draft. If it's the Jets, I can't imagine the Jets trading down with the Bills to give them their franchise quarterback. The Jets would need Darnold just as much as the Bills would. So I think you need to find a team that either has a quarterback or doesn't like the quarterbacks in this class and is willing to move down and sees good value in a trade down. That would be where you kind of need to make your magic. Otherwise, you'd have to, as the Bills, be bad enough this year where you can get the number 1 or number 2 pick yourselves. I think that's kind of how it's going to play out.
Okay, so the Bears. Got it. All right. Mike Rodak. Mike Rodak here covers the Bills for ESPN. One more question before I let you go. The Eagles are going to play the Bills this coming week in the preseason matchup. What are some of the things to keep an eye out for, whether it's position battle wise, or obviously they're going to be incorporating new guys in this offense with Tyrod Taylor. We're going to see a different kind of defense with McDermott and Frazier there. So talk about some of the things that you're looking forward to in this second preseason game for the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. I want to see how Tyrod Taylor is going to adapt to basically a whole new group of receivers this year compared to what he had last year. Where Anquan Bolden fits in if he does play, because he didn't play last Thursday night here. Where Jordan Matthews fits in if he plays. Zay Jones, like I mentioned, the second-round pick, just how does that passing game look, after getting rid of your best receiver? Also, LaShawn McCoy did not play in that preseason opener against the Vikings 2 nights ago, so I would expect him to play against the Eagles back in Philadelphia, maybe not as much as the rest of the offense, but at least get him out there for a little bit of work. And then defensively, like you mentioned, some new scheme for Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, and how the corner position starts to shake out now with the E.J. Gaines coming in. Does he start alongside Tre'Davious White, the first-round pick that they had this year, who's the other corner, where Reggie Ragland, the second-round pick last year, fits in because he's been running with the third team, and there's some questions about his future. So, there's a lot to digest with this game, and, obviously we're only 3 weeks away from the season, so there's a lot of new pieces the Bills have to work into the mix here pretty quickly.
Mike Rodak covers the Bills for ESPN. Mike, appreciate you taking the time today, and good luck trying to figure out what this offense is going to look like moving forward.